trying to do this summer is not only technical in nature, but also give you some experience making presentations that you can carry over to your later career. Or, in other words, being able to stand up in front of a group of people and talk about something technical is a broadly applicable skill. So, and some of what I'm going to say you'll probably find very obvious. You know, basically everybody understands what's required in making a technical presentation. You have to disseminate information. You're trying to educate an audience, and in your case, a short period of time. And by the way, you have a time limit of 12 minutes, so please keep that in mind. In 12 minutes, you've got to describe in fair detail what it is that you did this summer. But I've been in situations in which I've had to make technical presentations to people who did not have a specific technical background in my field. When you work for a company, if you go to work for industry, you may have to make some sort of a proposal to a vice president, who may not have a degree in engineering. And if your work is highly technical, it's not easy necessarily to describe something that's highly technical in terms that is understandable for a layperson. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those sorts of issues today. And first of all, if you have any questions at any time, don't hesitate to ask or just blurt something out. This is not intended to be a very formal presentation. And if you have any concerns or you disagree with something I say, or you have any questions, just go ahead and ask them. One of the things I wanted to say initially is that if you ask half a dozen different people, different engineers, what constitutes an effective technical presentation, you're likely to get half a dozen different answers because everybody's got a slightly different view. And so what I'm going to say today is not necessarily the right way to do it. It's just my opinion. And some of the things I think we can all agree on, but there are other things that may be a little bit questionable. All right. So I want to start with, well, Dr. Harrell, okay.
I have a question. Are you going to ask me something?
No.
I was going to. Would you prefer that door to be closed or what?
It doesn't matter. I mean, once you leave, I'm going to start talking about some subversive things, so it might be good to have closed.
That's okay. So you got a recorder here just in case.
I see. Okay. Is this going on YouTube?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Anyway. Since Dr. Harrell mentioned PowerPoint, I don't necessarily mean to suggest that you have to use PowerPoint. You may, some of you, I don't know if you use Macs or Windows, some of you may have Linux machines that you like. If there's some other presentation software that you need, if next week I'm going to be using my machine here, which is a Windows machine, then it probably needs to be PowerPoint. So would that be a concern for anybody? Would it be an inconvenience for you not to use PowerPoint? Okay. If not, if you have your own, the reason for, the motivation for preferring that is if there are 10 of you and you all have to make 10 or 12-minute presentations and you all use different laptops, then there's a, if between each pair of presentations we have to disconnect the machine, then that can eat up, over the course of the afternoon, that can eat up a lot of time. So it's preferred to have all of them downloaded on one laptop so that we can go from one to the next fairly quickly. And just to let you know what's going to happen a week from today at the same time, you're going to have the opportunity to make your presentations just sort of as a dry run, a practice, and I will bring some rating sheets, some comment sheets, so you can all comment on each other's presentations, and hopefully when the time comes for the real thing, the final presentations, which I believe are the following Wednesday, the 24th of July, then you will have had the opportunity to rehearse and then make some mistakes and go back and correct them, and so hopefully you can give a really polished presentation on that for the final event on the 24th. Okay, so PowerPoint. I wanted to begin by saying something about PowerPoint. See you, Rod. The good thing about PowerPoint one of the good things, is that it enables you to make really good-looking slides with a minimum of effort. It's one of the best things about it. One of the worst things about PowerPoint, though, is that it enables you to make really nice-looking slides with a minimum of effort. Okay, now why is that bad? Well, the good is also bad. The reason why it's bad is that because it's such a convenient tool to use, it lulls people into it essentially it lulls you into this false sense of security where you think, oh, I can throw together a presentation, give me half an hour, and I can, because PowerPoint's going to let me put these slides together and they'll look really nice. The thing is that the slides that you make are not the basis of the presentation. I want to stress right off the bat here that you have to plan before you even think about making slides. What you should do before any technical presentation is to plan what you want to say in a systematic way. So any good presentation begins with systematic planning, and just diving in and starting to make slides without thinking about what you want to say and in what order you want to say it, that's getting the cart before the horse. The first thing that you need to do, and again, a lot of this may sound obvious to you, and I don't mean to be pedantic about it, but obviously, if you want to give a presentation, you have to understand what it is that you want to present. And in your case, it shouldn't be a major, an extreme effort, because again, it's only a 10 to 12 minute presentation, so there's not a whole lot. It's not going to be some mammoth effort. It's not like planning an oral defense for a doctoral dissertation, for example. But still, you need to figure out what it is that you have to say. And as I mentioned early on, a few minutes ago, my comments today are really meant to be a little bit more broadly applicable to presentations in general, and not just this summer's presentation. I'm trying to give you some insight into what you would need to do in any scenario that you might face in industry. The possible objectives that you might have. Number one, there are different types of technical presentations. There's not a generic technical presentation that's a one-size-fits-all presentation. Depending upon why you're giving it and to whom, you may need to give a different type of presentation. You may be trying to sell something. You may be giving a proposal, trying to get funding for something. You may be summing up work that you did like this summer. So you need to know what type of presentation it is. Also, who's going to be attending. And in your case, those questions, you pretty much already have the answer to those questions. The people in your audience for this presentation coming up in a couple of weeks are going to be your colleagues here, fellow students, and professors by and large, maybe some graduate students. So in other words, while they won't necessarily know in great depth, they might not necessarily be particularly attuned to the specific work that you're doing, you can still count on them being reasonably technically proficient. Most people in the room know Ohm's Law, for example, and so that might not be the case for a vice president of management who has a marketing degree. The expected information content, if you've got only a 10-minute presentation to make, then you're going to be covering certain details, but if you have an hour and a half to talk about something, then you can go into greater depth. You need to understand these things. In other words, before you make a single slide, before you start preparing the presentation, you have to answer questions like these. Who's going to be in the audience? What type of presentation is it? What kind of information do I need to convey? Also, this is very important, the time requirements. I mentioned this before. You have, and I need to stress, I'm not trying to be draconian about this, but just by virtue of the number of you that there are here, even if you run over by a few minutes, if all of you run over by 5 minutes, right, that's almost an extra hour. Okay, so Dr. Harold has allotted 15 minutes, a 15-minute window of time for your presentation and the questions. And so it would be best for you to limit the total length of your presentation to 12 minutes. So I would recommend somewhere between 10 and 12. And next week, when you go through the dry run, I'm actually going to bring a stopwatch. And I'll sit back in the back and actually time you, and so that you'll know exactly how long it takes to get through it. And just for your information, most people tend to run over the first time through. I guess it's human nature in these sorts of situations to underestimate the length of time it takes you to say something. If you haven't done much of this before, you might tend to think exactly the opposite. You think, 12 minutes, that's an eternity. How can I possibly fill up 12 minutes? But in reality, the 12 minutes will go by just like that, and you may find that you're only halfway finished. Okay, so those are the requirements that you need to identify. Also, objectives. Objectives are a little bit different from requirements. A requirement is something that has to be true, some attribute that your presentation has to have. An objective is something that you want to accomplish. Like I said, in more general situations, you might be trying to sell something, you might be trying to convince an audience that something is true, you might be trying to win approval for something. Maybe you're working for a company and you've had 6 months to do some preliminary research on something, and you want to try to get some additional funding for a project. You might be attempting to warn a group of people that something is dangerous. Maybe a certain product design you think may lead to an unsafe product. Your purpose for this presentation coming up now, or in a couple of weeks, is to educate. You can essentially approach this with the idea that your purpose in making this little 10 or 12 minute presentation is to convey as much information, or impart as much knowledge as you can about the work that you've done this summer, in such a fashion that your fellow students and the professors who are going to be watching this learn as much as they can about what you've done. All right, but there is, underneath all of this, an implied, not explicit objective, but it's kind of an implied, maybe ulterior objective. You want to give the impression that you're knowledgeable and also that you're credible. In other words, you want to appear to know what you're talking about and appear to be believable. You don't want to look like an idiot, and you don't want to look like a liar. So that goes across the board regardless of what the presentation is that you're making. Whether or not what you're saying is completely true or completely untrue, you want to appear, you want to give the impression that you know what you're talking about. And I've seen, over the years, I've seen people who really are quite knowledgeable stand up and fumble around and give the impression that they're clueless, when in fact the things that they're trying to convey make perfect sense. It's just you have to realize that the technical work that you do can, in certain situations, be come to no useful end when you're not capable, if you lack the communication skills to convey the importance of it to other people. All right. Well, what do you do to develop a presentation? First of all, start early. And that's kind of difficult in this situation because you have only a couple of weeks to do the whole thing. Hopefully you've been maybe thinking a little bit about it over the course of the summer. You've known, I hope, from the start that you would have an oral presentation to make. But obviously the earlier you start, the easier it is to put it together. You should identify the key issues, the main points that you want to include. This kind of reminds me of something I can't resist. This start, when I mentioned start early. I did my doctoral work at Georgia Tech. Is anybody here from Georgia Tech? Okay, good. I can make this joke. Georgia Tech, you're not really going to put this on YouTube, are you?